What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms.
You're listening to The More Show, and here's your host, Kevin Moore.
Welcome back to the show. We're about to be joined with our guest, Ben Abba. Here's a bit of background on Ben. He's an experienced security consultant for various financial institutions. One day he used his unique skill in finding fraudsters to locate the oldest people alive. To his shock and amazement, he found several people living among us that are over 250 years old, and a few that were over 1,000 years old. Ben is now sharing his experiences with these remarkable super-centenarians with the world. He has recently co-authored a book with Dr. Wayne Dyer titled Wake Up, Live the Life You Love, Wake Up Moments of Inspiration, and will soon be releasing his second book into his research about the oldest super-centenarian he has found, titled Secrets of an Immortal, an Eyewitness Account of 2,500 years of history. Ben, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a great honor to be on your show, and looking forward to a very exciting and enlightening interview today.
Now, Ben, before we start, we're going to discuss your interview with an Immortal that you had. But to begin with, just tell me a bit about yourself, please.
Well, I'm a financial security consultant. I work with various financials around the world to secure primarily their internet banking, internet transaction processing, but I also get involved with some of their physical security as well, although not as much nowadays. And many years ago, a gentleman, a fellow coworker, dropped off on my desk a tape titled "Dead Doctors Don't Lie." It's by Dr. Walsh. He's a veterinarian here in the United States that, as a hobby, was researching the obituaries of our standard health givers and noticed a pattern. And that pattern was that the standard health givers were dying at a younger rate than was considered average in the United States. So it got me thinking, if the health givers aren't people we should be looking up to model our lifestyles after for living a longer and healthier life, who should we be modeling our lifestyles after? And that's how I began my quest for looking for people much older than me that I could learn some tips and tricks on how to extend my life and extend the quality of my life as well.
So what actually made you go on this quest and concept of immortality in a sense then?
Well, I started stumbling on people that were living. Well, first off, you are well aware, of course, the Guinness World Book of Records, which has currently Gene Calment as the oldest person alive, about 122 years. But as I started doing my research, I was finding people much older than that on various records, other than Guinness Book of World Records. In fact, the oldest gentleman I found alive on the Internet was a gentleman by the name of Lee Ching-Young, who, according to many sources, including the New York Times and Canadian papers, lived to the ripe young age of 256 years. So I started to thinking if the people that are on record are living longer than what we consider normal, who else is out there that's not on record? And to my surprise, using some of my researching skills I use in my occupation and some unorthodox skills I picked up along the way in my life, I started finding people living much longer than 250 years of age and are still alive today. That was quite a surprise, and that's how I began looking for who could be on the earth right now living as long as they so choose.
So before we start talking about the interview you had with this Immortal, let's just talk about the ideas of immortality and the real secrets behind it. I mean, do you want to just discuss some ideas about why they believe that they live to a sort of grand old age?
Well, again, as part of the research, and this was kind of a key feature, is how do they live longer? And I was looking at different people on record and some they're not on record as to what their secrets were. And obviously we hear about the healthy lifestyle of eating good food and eating certain types of food, and perhaps getting a daily walk in, and but some other things that weren't quite as expected started popping up. And one in particular was, of course, they pushed to live a stress-free lifestyle. That seemed to be a very big part of their lifestyle that I found very fascinating. And then, of course, there was some spiritual element to the common to all these people that wasn't as well discussed nowadays. But if you think about it logically, it does make some sense. And then there's, of course, their way they lived as far as the relationships with other people. That seemed to be a very big part of all these people. In fact, most of them are married or married multiple times, right up to their last days, which I found incredibly fascinating. So it seemed to be a lot of some common knowledge and some common sense things, as well as some kind of unknown secrets that popped up in my research on these people.
So, okay, let's start with the sort of diet then. I mean, is there anything that they sort of avoid that would help them, in your view, live longer?
Well, one of them that really struck me the most, in particular, happened to be discussed on a show here in the United States by a correspondent named Barbara Walters. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Barbara Walters. She's pretty famous here, and she had a special, How to Live to 150 Years. And on that special, she happened to have a group of people, which ironically I believe were from Great Britain, that would call themselves the CRs, or calorie-restricted diet people, CRDs, excuse me. And what they believe in is their lifestyle will be extended if they eat as little as possible every day. Well, the ironic thing I found common among most of these people that were living 250 years or older is they eat in one day what I would typically eat in one snack. So their diets were very restricted, to them unintentionally, but to me it would have to be, of course, most of us would have to be intentional, but I believe if I strive to get that diet, that I could too extend my life. So I noticed that was a very common theme among their diets. Another thing that showed up on that same show, How to Live to 150 Years by Barbara Walters, was this element found in red wine called resveratrol. And I noticed these people that I was researching, over 250 years of age and older, all made it a point to have at least one glass of red wine a day. And perhaps that's all they had of wine was one glass, but many of them did have red wine, a glass of red wine a day. So there was two common of many different things that showed up in my research that help them, at least to their beliefs and to mine now, extend their lives.
And you mentioned as well sort of their sort of outlook. So are we saying they had a more positive outlook than you'd expect to find? Was it sort of like, a smile counts a long way?
Well, exactly, and that's we could spend the whole show talking about just that one piece. But let me give you a couple of little examples. And this was something that when I asked the few that I did interview, what was their secret to living longer, or even their secret to immortality, and it was they didn't believe in death. They believed living each day to its fullest. And I started thinking about, that could be a very powerful skill or tool, because basically as you believe you can live longer and you have the spiritual belief behind it, why couldn't you and the universe or the world or whoever is listening to you give you what you need to extend your life? And in case in point, we had a famous musician here named John Denver, and he used to tell his friends every day, I don't know if you know him or not, but he's got some common music. It's been a while, but he used to tell his friends every day that he was going to die in his plane. And sure enough, one day his plane crashed off the coast of California, and he died in his plane. So it made real clear to me, at least in some of these examples, that our language patterns and what we strive for in life, what we think about, what we push for, does have an impact on our lifestyle and of course, how long we're going to live. And so I noticed these people had the language patterns to match their beliefs, what I would call congruency in their lifestyle. What I noticed as I started incorporating their beliefs into my own life, my language patterns began to change. More positive language patterns. Instead of saying, I will die for a piece of chocolate cake, I will live longer for a piece of chocolate cake. And just that little bit of change into my life has increased and improved my life. So I've noticed that in my own life. I noticed that in their speech patterns and their dialogues and interviews, that they use that same type of positive and I would say thoughtful language, as well as that is congruent with their lifestyle.
So just to briefly sum it up then, when you do get these sort of negative thinking people, or we all think negative thoughts sometime. I mean, I'm most guilty of it myself, but it's to sort of brush away that negative thought and replace it with a positive one, and what we think we become. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a very good way of summing up, because I noticed that, and I did probe this the last couple of interviews, that how did they handle the negative thoughts? How did they handle when there was somebody lost? And again, that could go into a lot in depth, but I noticed that they brushed them off and took the positive side of it and went with that. And I'm not saying living every day of life, every moment in rose-colored glasses, but truly they looked at the positive and they focused on the positive instead of focusing on the negative of everything in their life.
Okay, so they didn't have a belief, or they didn't sort of ever focus on passing on, really, in death.
Yeah, they seem to avoid the concept. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in our typical modern culture now, even our media, it seems like we're being programmed to die. And they just turn that off and say, I don't believe in that. I think that's just fiction. And in fact, the one gentleman who we'll get to later on, he just made a point not even to attend funerals. His belief is that they're still here somewhere. There's just somewhere they've gone on a long vacation, or they've gone on a very long trip, and they'll show up someday. So I found that a very fascinating belief. But if you don't want to believe in death and choose not to believe in death, then this is one way to enforce that belief.
But what about the idea when your time's up, your time's up? I mean, people may be listening to this now and thinking, well, okay, if I change my diet, change the way I think, this may help me to live a more active, prolonged life. But I mean, what about that key issue that in a sort of final destination sense, that when your time's up, which you're not going to know quite when it is, it's up.
Well, you just hit on the big key lesson that I've learned on all of this, and it's the hardest thing I could learn, because I've seen so many people in my own life, pass on at a very early age, and that is, life is not a predetermined event. It is as long as we choose to live. And let me stress on something. It's going to be totally, totally difficult to believe in, but once you think about it and you give it some serious thought, it makes total sense. And that is, and this also incorporates the spiritual side of things, and that is, we have the choice of living as long as we so choose. And to what again, this is kind of taking what these people are saying to me and putting it all together. I'm picking up that death is a choice and not a predetermined event. And in fact, all death is really suicide, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And we start exploring what these people are saying, that starts to make sense. But I tell you, I had a very difficult time believing it until I started putting it all together. And seeing it firsthand, what they've accomplished to prove this to me, made it all come home to me. I don't know how I could teach that to other people, but I'm going to make an effort through my discussions and interviews and writings. This is the biggest lesson I learned from all of them, that we can choose to live as long as we so choose, and it's up to us to decide when that is, if we so desire to live a longer or shorter life.
Well, that's very interesting, what you've had to say just there. But what about, let's just go back to a health issue then. What about if an individual believes in the way in what you're saying, and I think it's quite true what you're saying, but what if that individual's smoking? I mean, isn't smoking a death wish?
Well, I noticed when I started incorporating what I've learned from these people into my own life, I started making healthier choices in my life. One of them, of course, I don't smoke, but I was subject to a lot of secondhand smoke. It was very difficult walking into what we should call a pub or some other places and not get smoke. And I started avoiding the secondhand smoke more, and I started eating healthier foods, and I started making healthier choices. And I think that's what the trick is once you embrace the idea of living as long as you so choose and allow it to become part of your lifestyle, you'll start making healthier choices, like not smoking, like not drinking in excess, like not eating what we call the fattier foods, or the foods that are unhealthy versus the foods that are healthy for you. And also, it's like I was trying to say earlier, it's not also what you eat, but how you eat it and what quantities you eat. It's important as well. So that's what I would say is if this is the choice, you're smoking right now and want to live longer, getting off those cigarettes is as quickly as possible is going to help in the long run.
Sure, and just going back to the dietary requirements you were saying, again, probably keeping the calories to a lower intake is also beneficial as well.
That's what it seems to be, and there's a lot of scientific evidence for that. There's been documentaries on that, and this is a common theme in the people I know that have lived longer than anyone else has.
Okay, well, let's sort of fast forward a bit here, and let's get to the point where you met this Immortal. Now, this Immortal was 2,800 years old. What kind of person was he?
Well, again, it's a long story how I found him, but he looks like a typical senior citizen. He's living a very healthy lifestyle for his age, obviously. Kind of looks like he's a really good in his 60s, and I understand he does vary his appearance a little bit. He has the means to do that, very slightly, but enough. And he is active in the community. He's been active throughout history, which is kind of what I'm writing about right now. And he is definitely a remarkable gentleman, but he's a very private person. So that's some of the things that I have to be careful about tonight, is not getting too much into his personal privacy issues as far as his identity is concerned.
And how could you prove that he was that old?
Well, that's going to be the hugest problem of all. And I don't actually, when I first met him, I didn't think it was even possible. Because think of it, we live in an age where recently we had this 40th anniversary of men walking on the moon. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but we still have people out there that believe that was all fake. And that was the most documented, most witnessed event in the entire world.
Yeah.
And so proving something happened 2,800 years ago, to me, is impossible. But as I started, I finally reluctantly decided to write his story down. And I started putting things together and working it out. I noticed lots and lots of circumstantial evidence start coming out. So I think if I could put the case together of his story and all the circumstantial evidence around it, which you'll hear bits and pieces of tonight and in every everywhere else I go. You start putting it all together, it starts making sense that this guy has to be that age. And another thing that's come up is I have, again, some unorthodox researching skills which helped me find this gentleman. And some of those techniques, if you could repeat them yourself, you would say, wow, this is incredible. And then also, if I could tell you some things which I'm not at liberty to discuss tonight, you'd go, wow, this is really incredible. So as far as giving you hardcore evidence right today on this interview, it's not going to happen. And in fact, it may be extremely difficult, it may be impossible to get it absolutely positively prove this gentleman is that age. But I think if I could lay out the case and give you what evidence I have, in time you'll see that this guy has to be that old or older.
Sure. I mean, did he know he was immortal until he reached a certain age, or was it, how did he discover that he wasn't aging as normal people were?
I asked him that question directly, and he said after a couple hundred years, he noticed everybody he knew was dying or was gone. And that's when it became kind of obvious to him that he had at least the ability to live longer than other people. And then eventually he had a couple of, would say, near-death experiences, and that became pretty obvious that he could live as long as he so choose. And again, that was his belief as well.
Okay, so nothing in his family had ever been led him to believe that this would happen to him before?
Nope, and he's told me none of his family has even lived as long as he has either, except for he had one son, he said, that lived about 250 years of age, and he also had a couple of wives that were suspicious that he was older than he said he was. But for the most part, it doesn't appear to be a genetic trait as well.
Okay. And what's his views on religion and afterlife then?
Well, that's a pretty good question. He is born and raised as a Jew, and has spent time in, I would say, there was a couple times in history he actually lived in Scotland. In fact, one time in the 1400s that he became a Christian at that time because he married, obviously, he called a very fine Christian lass, and was introduced to the Christmas ceremonies. He also spent some time in Lebanon and married a Muslim woman, and was not what we call a frequent member of their church, but or mosque. But he did, was married in their faith. To him, religion is a personal thing. His basically belief is that God's an invisible friend that's with him always. But he does attend religious ceremonies of his family and friends, of whatever religious faith they are, just to take part in the ceremonies, obviously instead of the funerals. But like, for instance, he loves Christmas music, so he enjoys that. So he's we can call a practicing member of any particular faith, but one who has a very, very strong spiritual faith. And I don't know if you've ever been in the presence of someone kind of like a guru, like maybe a pope or a Dalai Lama or somebody like that. They have this incredible, I don't know how to describe it, feeling that they're really well connected to God, to the spiritual realm. And when you're in their presence, and he definitely has this surrounding him that's just amazing. So when you even get close to this person that there's a connection there, and a very strong one at that.
And did he look old? I mean, was he as we were classed a senior citizen?
He looked like a typical senior citizen, except when he started smiling, his teeth looked really, really bad. He still has original teeth. One of the little things I'd learned from him is during ancient times, of course, they didn't have toothbrushes and toothpaste, so he would make a gargle out of oregano, which helped him preserve his teeth, but it darkened his teeth and almost blackened it. It's very distinguishedly bad-looking teeth, and his skin seems to be a little bit translucent compared to what we consider. It's like almost like a rubbery kind of translucent. But for the most part, if you walked in the street, and of course most of the time I saw him was fully clothed, he'd be indistinguishable from other 60 to 80-year-old people. Like you're a typical grandfather.
Yeah. And I suppose one of the reasons I suppose he's not coming forward is he's maybe going to put himself in harm's way if he did with what I suppose the gene or whatever else he's carrying.
Yes, and also the fact that if somebody came over or came forward that was an immortal, and you had his name and address and everything, you can think of just the chaos it would cause. I mean, by the paparazzi, the people just mugging him all the time, and then we'd have to deal with governments that would probably kidnap him to turn him into a lab rat, and then individuals who don't like the idea of this particular person being alive and would go out and intentionally try to do him harm. And I was trying to mention as well is that I started writing about this on the internet on various forums and discussion sites, and I started getting nasty emails, nasty posts, and in fact, it's even a couple of death threats. So it just amazes me how many people out there, even though I'm trying to bring out this information for free and help people that might be of interest, there's so many people out there that just simply do not want to have this information made public. I just find it extremely fascinating. So with the combination of all that, I can really understand why he doesn't want to reveal his name or get too much of his private information out. But on the other hand, I find this information so invaluable that it would be, to me, a crime against humanity, not least to give out as much information about him as I can.
We're going to take a break there, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
To connect with the show, email kevin@themooreshow.co.uk. You're listening to The Moore Show, and here's your host, Kevin Moore.
Welcome back to the show. I'm currently joined here with our guest, Ben Abba, where we've been discussing his new book, Secrets of an Immortal, an eyewitness account of 2,800 years of history. Now, Ben, when you got to interview this immortal, how did he feel about modern society as regards to what he had witnessed all those years back?
Well, that's a long discussion as well, but let me give you kind of some of the highlights of what he's told me. One of the things is he marvels at how history continues to repeat itself over and over again. He finds that people are, in some sense, smarter, obviously have more technology than they did in the past, but they become less and less moral. They have less values. Their values for life in general has become decreased, although we saw some pretty nasty wars and events in his past. One of the things I thought was very fascinating was, of course, we have a big discussion these days about global warming, so I'll bring up kind of what he said about that.
Sure.
To him, things have gotten a lot colder and a lot drier since his childhood days. He used to have, he grew up in the Middle East, and they used to have a lot of lush gardens down there, and he says he never remembers ever hearing about snow in the Middle East when he was growing up. To him, a lot of people moved to the UK and Scandinavia to get away from the heat. That's one of the reasons so many people moved north, and now there's starting to be more and more of them moving back south to get some heat. So to him, it was much warmer in the past. He also remembers that it just seems like there's lots of cycles, of course, with weather changes and things over time. But his biggest, I asked him one time what was the most impressive piece of technology he's seen, and he had two items that popped up. One of them, of course, was his air conditioner, which he found very helpful, especially in the days when it was very hot, and the growth of the trains. He just is totally fascinating about how the entire world seems like, at least in the Middle East and Europe, become so modernized with trains. He just finds that extremely fascinating and how well it connects everything together. He does marvel at the fact that we've had a man landing on the moon, but to him that's something on TV versus the trains where he can jump on and jump off anytime he so chooses. So there's a couple of snippets of what he said about that topic.
So, I mean, did he talk about how, how difficult it must be for him to see his loved ones pass, and obviously for him to have to make a new life for himself every time a generation or more is lost?
He did, and in some sense, and then he kind of, like I said, mentioned that to him they're not quite dead yet. Let me give you a good example. One of the things I wanted to find out was how far back in time he could have any memories of all. And I don't know if you're in this case, but sometimes it's very difficult to remember some things that are high school or childhood times.
Of course.
Just some events we can remember very clearly and some we can't. So here we're talking about 2,800 years of memories. And seemed that his oldest memory that he had was of a younger sister who was very fond of. And during the times back then, it sometimes was customary to sell off some of the women, the children, to pay off debts or to marry them off to whatever person they had respect for. And again, they had different traditions about that. Anyway, he came home after he was into as a younger child or a teenager, would say, a goat herder, and came home one day, and his youngest sister, who he was very fond of and they had a very strong relationship with, was suddenly gone. And the family said, well, she was married off, no goodbyes, nothing, and it really, really upset him. And he, again, felt that, of course, she's somewhere out there, doesn't know where she is, and if she'll ever see her again. But one of the things that he got very emotional and very angry about what happened to his sister. He didn't feel it was right, of course, and I noticed that the level of emotion when he was answering the question, and I felt, well, that's the key, and that seems to be is the key with his memories, is if there's an emotional attachment, a very strong emotional attachment to this memory. It was very much embedded in his life. When I asked him questions about things that he didn't have any emotional impact, he just kind of give me either a non-answer or just kind of a poo-poo answer. So, yes, it did affect him. I'm sure his first few wives, losing them affected him, but it seemed like over time that, and I asked him about his previous wives, he's had many. Some of them he just has very strong memories of, and some he doesn't. And I think that's kind of what's happened, is he kind of went through very different cycles of being involved with his families, and then at some point in time just kind of disconnected from them. He's just recently lost his wife about 10 years ago, and has some strong feelings about that. But I got the impression that he was about ready to move on with his life and start a new life again, and again search out another wife. So that looks like that's one of those ways he deals with the loss, is start a new life somewhere, a different city, and create a new family.
And it's never made him once want to join them on the other side, basically, because had it had done that, then he would have given up this fight for, having no question about death, I suppose. I mean, had he questioned death, then, as we go back to what we said before, then he feels that he would have passed on. Is that right?
Yeah, it seemed like he knows they're there somewhere, but doesn't know where they are. So to him, the other side is just maybe another continent, or another country, or another city. That's one that he's had great difficulty in getting to. So with that kind of an attitude, they're actually not really gone. They're just moved on to a different location on a long extended holiday, as he put it. Okay.
Now, I believe that, reading your book as well, that he actually met Christ, Jesus Christ. Would you just tell us a bit about this, please?
Well, this is one of those areas I got to be real careful about, because at the time I was talking to him, the Passion of the Christ movie had come out and went through its controversies, and the Da Vinci Code was just coming out. It was being advertised. And I don't know if you're aware of those two movies. The Middle East, I think, hated the Passion of the Christ, but the Europeans loved it, and it was vice versa for the Da Vinci Code. So, and his words were, please don't tell people about this, because I really don't want to start up another controversy, because I'll tell you what I can tell you about it, and then I'll just kind of drop it from there. He did have a 6-year friendship with Christ, and it really was Jesus Christ, and he's got quite a bit of information. In fact, I went looking for this guy to find out how to live longer. His eyewitness accounts of history are so priceless. I just have goosebumps just talking about it. It was like a bonus. And so when it got to the point we started talking about what were you doing in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, he started opening up, and it was just one fascinating story after another. And let me tell you that the good news is he doesn't really contradict anything that's in the Bible, but his stories and personal accounts of what the real historical person, which we call Christ today, is to me even more impressive than what's in the Bible. So that's kind of the summary of what it is. And the case in point, he was in Christ, had a house, and he was in Christ's house, and he can describe in detail what was in that house. So to me, that's fascinating because it tells another story that we just don't hear about in the Bible. It's just not even there. Obviously, there's a lot of controversies of what was in the house, what wasn't in the house. One of the things that came up, of course, is what we call the Holy Grail, the last cup. And he gave an eyewitness account of something that I was able to verify with some other sources exists today. And so I thought that was pretty incredible that, he's seen this thing in this house that we call, some other sources claim is the cup of the Last Supper, which I found very fascinating. He got to meet most of the main characters of the gospel, and he did not obviously attend the crucifixion, but he's aware that there was a survival of the crucifixion, and a lot more fascinating stories that just I can't go into much more detail about, but we'll have to say that we have an living eyewitness now to these events that's going to be pretty phenomenal when I'm able to talk about it in more detail.
So we say a survival of the cross, but does that make Christ human, basically? Or did it make him human in his eyes?
Well, how do you go with that? That's a question, boy, that's hard to answer because we have so much, we're going to say, stigma attached to that. But I'm going to let that one go, but as I say, his stories will answer that question.
Okay. So after having the sort of brief conversation with him about Christ, so you would say that the gospel is correct to a degree of account?
He didn't witness every event in the gospel, of course, but the ones he did witness corresponds to what's in the gospel. So
okay.
I would say he witnessed maybe about 5 to 10% maximum, but and he also heard stories. Obviously, people talk. It was like the big news of the day. And so everything he heard and saw corresponded to what was in the gospel. So I'll be correct in saying that.
Sure. That must have been quite an emotional memory for him, really.
Very emotional. I was surprised. He was quite upset about the crucifixion. We start getting into a little bit, he kind of choked up and didn't want to go over too much detail. Even though he didn't witness it, in fact, he said, I'm not going to watch The Passion of Christ. I could not handle that. He just said, I couldn't handle that. So he won't even watch the movie. And so, obviously, there was a very strong friendship that was developed there, mutual admiration for both. There's just so much to talk about. I want to tell you everything, but out of respect for him, I just can't go into detail. No,
that's fine. And one question I've got to ask is, what's his views? I don't know if you got to ask him, but what was his views, if you did, on the extraterrestrial presence? Did he ever witness anything in the skies that was strange, all those hundreds of years back?
Wow. I actually have an answer that I can tell you about today. I'm not going to write about this in the book, but I will tell your audience this one. I asked him about that. He never saw what we consider an extraterrestrial at all, but 2,000 years ago, he said there was more things flying around than there is today. And I go, what? And he goes, yeah. He said that they were like little silver things that would fly in different directions all around, and he called them, they were called the chariots of the gods. That's what they called them. He never saw one up close. He saw one land at a distance. But he said there were more things flying around, and obviously there weren't Boeing 747s. So whoever was making stuff flying around 2,000 years, I don't know. He doesn't know either. They said they're just called the chariots of the gods, and so in his mind, obviously somebody was flying around with something, but didn't know what it was. It was like little silver things, he said, in the sky. They cross the sky every now and then when people look up, and that's about his answer.
Incredible. And again, getting back onto some sort of esoterical examples, did he ever talk about the pyramids?
Oh, yes, quite a bit in detail. To him, the pyramids were way built long before he was born, obviously, and many years previous to that. To them, they were not tombs. To them, they were equivalent of, let's say, refrigerators and hospitals and libraries. And you go, what about that? And he said the contents of the tombs were designed to him, or that's what the theme was, to preserve, whether it be to preserve grain, special grains, or basically documents, because there's some special properties which scientifically have now been proven that the pyramid shape does have special properties to preserve different things. And so in a sense they were like refrigerators for certain foods for the pharaohs and whatever. But they also were used for certain medical techniques. In particular, a lot of people paid a lot of money to have their child being born in these things. There was kind of a belief system that these energy fields that the pyramids created inside helped deliver a healthier, longer living baby, maybe as an immortality type of thing, which I found really fascinating. So something interesting, another one of those unwritten history facts that I found quite fascinating that he produced, that I can find some evidence of that backs up his claim, and possibly some more circumstantial evidence this guy really lived back then.
Now, did he ever get to meet, I suppose, any sort of famous artists or famous inventors? I mean, did he mention them to you?
Oh, yes. In fact, my first book, which I'm just about ready to publish, called Secrets of an Immortal, an Eyewitness Account of 2,800 Years of History, is going to highlight some of these more famous name droppers throughout history. I'll just give you a couple off the bat. He never met Cleopatra personally, but he did see her walking through the streets that she would often go through in parades and stuff. He spent most of his life as a merchant on the Mediterranean Sea, and of course, being a merchant, you would have to deal with either the richer people of the area or the leaders, and whatever leaders that we know of histories, like the Caesars, the popes, Napoleon. What was it? Peter the Great. And again, not directly with Cleopatra, but some of the people that were some of the Romans back then. He had to deal with them as far as part of his business. So he's got some fascinating tales to tell about his encounters. Some of them brief, some of them a little more extended with these famous people. He also got a chance to meet the emperor. I think it's called Qin. I hope I pronounced that right, which is where the word China comes from. About 2,500 years ago, in a voyage that they took from the Mediterranean Sea to China, which is another fascinating story. But the most famous one of all, which is in my chapter 10 of the book, is he was in Italy at the time and was working on a project that he needed a young, talented engineer to help him with, and he ended up hiring the young, just out of art school engineer by the name of Leonardo da Vinci, and he ended up having about 2.5-year business friendship with Leonardo da Vinci, and some of the stories he talks about in their project that they worked on together are just totally fascinating, about this young man who later became not only a famous artist but a famous engineer as well.
It's incredible. That really is incredible. And do you believe that there's more immortals like him living out there?
I believe there's about 5 people. Again, I did some rough research on this, that are over 1,000 years of age that are living among us today, and about 25 that are about 250 years or older today. So, yes, I believe there's. And to me, I call a person immortal that's a person that's figured out how to live as long as they so choose. So yes, I believe there's a lot of those people are immortals, and I believe through my words and my actions, I'm going to create a few more. So I think a few people are going to pick up on what I'm saying and what this gentleman's been telling me, and are going to become immortals in time. They may still be under 100 years of age, but they'll get there.
And obviously, in your opinion, then, with your research, is it more of is it the men that live longer than the women, or is it, can it be either?
Well, that's the weirdest part of the research that came up. All the people that are over 250 years of age that I could find were all men, which really shocked me because typically women live longer than men. The oldest woman I could find was about 160, well, almost 200 years now, living in India. So I don't understand exactly the reason why. I could make a few snide jokes about it. Maybe men are too stubborn to die, kind of a thing. But I don't understand why that is. But the oldest person I found alive is truly a man, and that's where it starts.
What message of hope does the Immortal that you met offer to the world today?
Well, actually, it's a very incredible message of hope, I think, anyway. And that is, first off, life is a set of choices that we can choose from, and we can choose to live as long as we want versus a predetermined event. And if I can teach people how to incorporate that in their lives, the changes in their health, the changes in their lifestyles, the changes in their longevity of their own life is going to be amazing. And I've noticed it in my own life, and I hope to teach people this as well. And there's also other incredible, I think I call blessings that this gentleman passed on, how much we can use of his knowledge, which is quite in depth, to add to improve on our lives, improving our friends and families' lives. It's quite a bit incredible. One thing also is we have a lot of people right now that are struggling, they're afraid to live almost every day because of the controversies, the media, what's going on our planet. The people that are out there even believing that 2012 everything comes to an end. And here's a gentleman that's enjoying every day, every life, and knows that he will live on this planet as long as he so chooses. And if we can just embrace some of this in our own lives, there won't be any reason to be afraid of, making next week's payroll or living past a very difficult time in their lives, whether it be a disease or a horrible death in their family or maybe a friendship that's broken up, and that we have the time to live our life to its fullest. Those are just the bits and pieces of this of hope I picked up from this gentleman that I just found totally fascinating and have incorporated into my own life.
And I suppose you could add on that, no matter what age you are, you can reinvent yourself.
Well, definitely. In fact, one of the things I want to talk to him about next time I visit with him is how does a 100-year-old man pick up chicks, especially young childbearing chicks. So I think if he can do it, anybody can. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of the belief in yourself and confidence and knowing that and doing things right, that you can even, like I said, a senior citizen, a very senior citizen, can have a wonderful relationship with another person.
So tell me when your new book is due out as well.
Well, the current book out is called Wake Up Moments of Inspiration, which I co-authored with Dr. Wayne Dyer and a few other people. That's already out on most of the book online bookstores and can be purchased. An autographed copy can be purchased through my website, benabba.com. The new book, which is going to be has turned into a 4-book series. The first one is called Secrets of an Immortal, an Eyewitness Account of 200 years of history. I'm taking pre-orders at secretsofanimmortal.com. It's just a long, painful process. I've had to rewrite it a couple times just to make it come out the right way, and I've had a couple editors convince me not to make it into a technical scientific journal, but to make it into an interesting read. And so that's why so many rewrites and so many editing is going on. That book should be out in the next few months, and I apologize if people have been waiting for it for a year or two, but it's coming together, and the parts that are out right now are just fascinating. So it's going to be an e-book first, and then it's going to go to the publishers because I can get the e-book out much easier and quicker. So that will be included if someone wants to pre-order it. The e-book will be included with the free copy of my existing book if they order the hard copy today.
Well, Ben, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you, and I really appreciate this time. I really look forward to another interview. I think we just scratched the surface of all the incredible information this gentleman has to offer and what I've learned from him in my many interviews with him.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to find out more on Ben's work, go to www.benabba.com or go to my site, themoreshow.co.uk, and look up Ben Abba under past guests. So until next time, be safe.